Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of the Back to the TARDIS podcast. I'm Jeff.
I'm Aurora.
And I'm Jen.
And today we are discussing the second of a trilogy of 2023 60th anniversary specials, Wild Blue Yonder, written yet again by who else? Russell T. Davies.
Yay!
I want to give a very specific shout out as well to, yes, Russell, but also the director of the episode, Tom Kingsley. I think this is the first Who thing that he's done before. Yes, it is. And in my opinion, between just the general look of the episode and also just the super well done, like Uncanny Valley CGI and the practical stuff and all the in-camera tricks in this episode, I think this is like by far hands down the best episode out of the three visually.
Yeah, technically.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Technically, it's impressive. Good go for a first run.
I don't know if you saw like the videos on Twitter about the
the thread,
prosthetics, but that was so cool.
Yeah. And so I don't know if this was actually a budget episode or was treated as a budget episode, but like for what would ostensibly be in a normal season a budget episode, like there is some good shit in this episode visually.
Yeah. I really appreciated the physical, like I don't know if you saw this part too, but they made a green screen that was like shaped like the corridor that had the specific doors that they interacted with, and that was just that was so cool.
Yeah, no, I watched all the behind the scenes stuff for this episode. There was just before we get into any of that, though, I will say also to set some real world context here, there was some interesting fan expectation going into this one because RTD and the rest of the crew very specifically revealed absolutely nothing about the episode. There was no promo aside from a couple clips a week out. There was no cast list. There was no like synopsis or anything. Nothing from the filming of this episode leaked at all, which is saying something because a whole bunch of stuff from the other two episodes leaked, even the stuff that was on studio filming. And a lot of people in the fan base who I will charitably say had some slightly misconstrued expectations thought that this was going to be like a bigger, crazier episode than it was. And I think about like by the time that we were getting up to it, I realized like, oh, it's just like they're not hiding Matt Smith or the ghost of William Hartnell. Like it's just going to be a weird two-hander episode, and they just don't want to spoil it because they don't want to spoil it. And as it actually turns out, like, yes, the reason why they didn't talk about it is because if they say anything about the concept, half the tension in the episode is immediately gone.
Yeah.
But I think it's very funny and also kind of raises a question of like, you know, we expect to know a shit ton of stuff about a lot of media before we go into it at this point because of the prevalence of the internet and how easy it is to get that sort of information and leaks out there. Yeah. And maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't.
I remember this was a big thing a few years back that they were just like constantly giving away like literally everything. I think Moffat was kind of infamous. Was it RTD?
So it wasn't Moffat, it was the BBC's publicity department with Moffat spoiled that John Sim was coming back, and I think maybe even Cyberbell and a couple things from like series 10 that Moffat was not very happy about. Moffat, I think, actually tried his best to run a tight ship.
Okay. Yeah,
and even then it was back in the era of like it wasn't quite as big of a problem as it is now. Yeah. And admittedly, you know, some people will say like, oh, we drag Chibnall stuff for similarly being fairly elusive and quiet. But in that case, it was less we don't know anything about it and more that like Chibnall wouldn't talk about there would be episodes coming, but he wouldn't say anything about like anything in any of the episodes or when they were supposed to be airing or anything until like basically it was in that case it was less they didn't talk about it at all and more there was just no publicity period, whereas here there was definitely publicity leading up to it, even if like there wasn't for this episode specifically.
There's a few things that come to mind. It's just like the landscape has changed so much, like people openly talking about leaks and kind of fandoms in general being like entitled, and I don't think that makes up the majority of Doctor Who, but definitely at least online there's a lot of people who are putting on their clown makeup, you know, including me sometimes, I won't lie. You know, as far back as like I can remember with Missy, like, oh, is that the Ronnie, is that someone else? It ended up being the simplest answer. And just stuff like that. Plus, you know, there's the added expectation, I think, of like, sure, 60th isn't the 50th, but like, oh, you know, let's up the multi-doctor. Like, sure, we have 14, which is like, I guess a spiritual successor or literal successor to 10. Like, where's Matt Smith? You know, his stock has kind of gone up a bit since, you know, House of the Dragon. He's no longer known for being in that very bad Terminator sequel.
Or Morbius.
Oh, God. The LGBTQ fandom has forgiven him for Morbius.
Okay, to be fair, from what I understand, he is far and away the best part of Morbius.
Yes.
Like, by a long shot.
And House of the Dragon, easily. That one's more debatable. But anyway, yeah, it was fun. I think by the time the episode came around, I was like, okay, no expectations. This probably isn't going to be, I think what James Gunn called the DCEU recently, just like cameo porn. Like it's not going to be that. And the episode is so much better for it. Like, obviously, with what we have now, I wouldn't want nor need anything other than what we got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, I will say to those people, hey, we did get a multi-doctor episode in this episode.
So true.
If you look at the credits, there are 3 people credited as playing the Doctor.
You know, just exactly what we need. More Tenant Doctors. Yeah, I really appreciate this episode being what it is. Like, in a series of 3 specials, you know, Doctor Who is kind of known for going all out and throwing all sorts of crazy shit at the wall. And I feel like it's such an RTD thing to just be like, no, we're just gonna do like a normal spaceship horror episode. And, you know, they kind of tie it into the next episode, and they're like, oh, the things they do here, like, brought in that one. But that just feels like a kind of, like, retroactive justification. It's just its own thing, and I really appreciate that. And it, you know, we were talking last episode about just, like, this return to form of feeling like Doctor Who again. And I feel like there's few more archetypical, or, like, there's few story structures more archetypical for Doctor Who than like showing up on a spaceship and there's some weird shit going on.
and it's a weird experimental two-hander. Like that's you could literally say that about multiple of my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
And I think what's important and good about this one is, so like the first time I watched it, like I liked it. But it hadn't quite fully clicked for me, and I kind of rewatched it again, and I rewatched it without any of the expectation, and even on my end where I'm like, oh, what if they do like a Scherzo or a Midnight? And it took until the second rewatch for me to realize that, yes, it is a weird atmospheric horror two-hander like those episodes or those stories, but it's not. The first time I kind of came away feeling kind of like it's all right on it, just due to like the fact that like I didn't think it hit quite as hard as like Midnight or Heaven Sent or Scherzo, but on a rewatch after kind of seeing what it was doing specifically and realizing that it is, despite being very similar in concept to a lot of those episodes, it is still doing something different, and also kind of growing to respect and learn and respect the in-camera tricks and the prosthetics and all that. Was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this is an extremely good and solid episode.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that nothing leaked from it, because we'll talk a little bit more about it next week. But like, the big thing from next week was leaked and discussed about on Twitter for months. So like, I already knew the thing that was going to happen when it happened. Now we'll get more into that next week. So we start off, that being said, before we get to any of that, we start with this complete fucking non sequitur opening that feels like Stephen Moffat stole the script and wrote something for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
with the Isaac Newton and the Mavity and all that. And I just have 2 notes on this scene. One, I think it's very funny that them being in England in 1666 and finding a dude who holds an apple automatically means that person is Isaac Newton. And I think it would be very, very funny if we did a Doctor Who historical that like the opening is set up all to be a celebrity historical, and the Doctor goes, "Oh, are you so-and-so?" And they go, "No."
That is a good idea, actually.
The lampshading of, oh, you have this thing set to famous.
Yeah.
That was good. Of course, there was the stupid controversy, because people have been latching onto every single thing, because apparently Doctor Who's big enough again to, I don't know.
The discourse is back!
Yeah. Personally, obviously it doesn't really matter. I kind of dislike, Hamilton tier colorblind casting, but it wasn't long enough for it to, like, actually matter.
It doesn't really matter, is the thing.
If it was a whole episode about that, then like maybe, but like it sets up like a joke, which I still can't. I go back and forth on whether it's stupid or not.
No, okay. So here's this ties into my second point, which is the only reason currently why Mavity is funny is because it has not been addressed or fixed at all since. And the implication that that's just permanently what it's called now in the Doctor Who universe is fucking hilarious.
Yes, it's brilliant. I've also seen some discussion like speculating that it's sort of setting up themes for the next season about like the Doctor accidentally causing like ripples in time that are gonna add up and cause something bad, which I do think is interesting. Yeah. And it just feels like people have been sort of making fun of RTD for doing like very blatant RTD setups about the like whatever big bad he's setting up. But I think the Mavity thing, if it is heading in that direction, is a lot. I feel like almost the big bad setup is a misdirection from the Mavity thing, potentially setting up something else, which I think is very fun.
Also, just, it is one of those lore bomb landmines that I think is really funny, like TARDIS wikis just going with the idea that because Elizabeth Sladen flubbed a line read where she was reciting the alphabet in the fucking 70s and accidentally got a letter mixed up and in the wrong place, and nothing else on screen has contradicted that just means that those letters are switched place in the Doctor Who universe. Like,
oh my god.
I think it would be so funny. I think it would be so goddamn funny if like they never change it back, and 20 years from now some fucking dude who doesn't know any better is getting dogpiled on future Twitter or whatever it is because he forgot that it's still called Mavity because nobody has undone it.
I would really like if the wiki just went with that and like every instance of gravity in the wiki was changed to Mavity.
Oh, dude, there was like vandalize edit wars going on the wiki like within hours.
Well, it's clear who's right there because canonically that's what it's called now.
Yeah. Yeah, the way that it is on the wiki right now is gravity, also known as, quote, Mavity, because they had to do that because people just started changing the entire page.
Nice.
Incredible stuff.
Yeah. But yes, after that weird digression, we get into the episode proper. I think it's a funny little tiny thing that I noticed that doesn't matter. When they dive out of the TARDIS at the beginning, the doors blow outward instead of inward, which I only think is funny because of the scene in the Doctor's Wife where the personified TARDIS is just dragging him for pushing to open the door every single time. And then, yeah, it's just kind of setting the stage. You know, the TARDIS is all exploding and shit because Donna spilled the coffee. But not to fear, the Doctor manages to set it so it's starting to fix itself. But then the HADS gets triggered again and it leaves with the Sonic. So that's your like, okay, we are dealing with just our wits. We don't have any tools or fancy outs. Except for the end, but I think the fancy out at the end works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of sets the stage for the first 15, 20 minutes of the episode proper to just be them wandering around and talking about shit.
The, watching it for either third or fourth time, I think it's one of those episodes where you appreciate it more because you notice even, like, more setup each time.
Yeah.
So seeing, like, what we come to know as like the not things, like listening in on the Doctor saying like, oh, you know, this is our ticket out of here once this is fixed. So like they know that from like the very beginning. And it's also just, you realize that like this is an episode where the Doctor just being in a place makes the situation like 10 times worse. But like at first watch, you don't know that, so it's like just great
and
touches.
it's like I'll just take a walk. What could possibly happen? What could possibly happen? We get crumbs of good Wilf content there, with the TARDIS is playing the U.S. Air Force theme song, also known as Wild Blue Yonder, and apparently like. Despite them being in the UK, and you think they'd have their own like the RAF official song or whatever, like Donna's was going like in the choir in elementary school. Donna was learning that, but Wilf objected because it's a war song. It's just great, you know. Every single time we hear about Wilf and the fact that he is a soldier but a pacifist, he takes pride in the fact that he, despite I think canonically being stationed in Palestine post World War II, never killed anyone.
I had no idea this was a Navy song until after I watched the episode, and I was just like, I had no idea what was going on with that.
Yeah. So yeah, they wander out into this CG corridor, the Unreal Engine 4 dimension. And I will say, as anyone who follows me on Twitter knows, I was immediately running defense for the CGI in these episodes because A, they look great. They're just not necessarily going for the style of realism that you'd necessarily see somewhere else. Like I really do like the way that the corridor is portrayed here, and it looks almost surreal as it stretches on for as far as the eye can see. Like it has a finite length, obviously, but to a human, it feels infinite because of just how long it is, while being exactly the same visually the whole way down. And it's this great, like, surrealist image. The second reason I've been running defense for these episodes CG is because I got hella into Kamen Rider this year, and buddy, if you think this is bad CG,
as you said, it's kind of what Doctor Who has done, especially like when it was just like barely coming back, of, you know, strategic use of, you know, uncanny CGI to like add to the tone or the atmosphere. And I just think like when people are complaining, it's just like, okay, like let's let's say that, like, what they did was they somehow managed to, like, make their own version of, like, Lucasfilm's The Volume. Let's say they did that. Sure, would that look, like, quote-unquote cleaner? Yeah, but, like, also it would... I don't know, just the way that it's just, like, kind of off at a certain point just, like, adds to it to me.
Yeah, and I mean, even, like, they did their best. Like, they had temp VFX, like, already ready, so they could see that in camera when they were filming, if you watch some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. So they, like, yes, the lighting doesn't 100% match all of the time, but they were already kind of, they knew what the basic visual structure of it was going to be. As they're walking around here and talking, we get to what I have in my notes here as Boy Kisser 14.
Base.
Which is where we get the really funny thing of the poster thumbnail with some woke chud adding the text box, like, or anti-woke chud adding the text box, "I like men now," to it. And listen, you know, it was a nice little nod in the episode, and yes, it's the first time this has happened in dialogue, because, like, yes, there's been kind of nods with 12, and 9 did kiss Jack that one time, but it's nice that there's, you know, this little bit. But boy, if people think it's gay now, just wait till the person who's actually gay is playing the Doctor next year. Or, well, not even next year, 2 days. 2 days from now, when we were recording this. This episode probably will be out after the Church on Ruby Road airs, but we're recording this 2 days before Christmas. I also think it's very funny that Donna basically hits him with the fucking dog with the caption, "I know what you are, PNG."
She's like that closet. That closet was made of glass, dude. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. They just kind of wander around and look around at the scenery. You see a little Scrimblow robot, and it's setting the scene for mechanics, but in all great episodes like this, you mechanics are shown, but you don't have enough information to intuit what the mechanics are or what their purpose is.
Yeah.
So, like, you don't know what the robot is doing, what the words, what we find out is the countdown is for, why the robot is moving so slowly, any of that, until the very end.
I will say, I just want to brag a little bit. As soon as I saw the robot moving very slowly and regularly, I was like, that's a countdown to something. And I didn't know what yet, but I called that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I figured it was some sort of timed interval. I just didn't know if it was like a countdown or like a normal cycle thing.
Like, just the image of the robot walking very slowly down the very long corridor. I mean, one, it's super evocative. Two, it very clearly reminded me of Heaven Sent. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
this is a long time frame thing that's gonna be really cool.
Yeah.
And it was.
Yes. The TARDIS leaves. The hostile action displacement system is triggered again for, God, when's the last time that... Cold War. Cold War was the last time that happened,
Really?
if I remember correctly. Yes.
That's a
why they don't
long
have the
time
TARDIS
ago.
in Cold War. Well, I mean, before that, it hadn't shown up since, like, the 70s.
Really?
Yeah. It happened
In my mind, the
Cold War.
TARDIS does this all the time, so I don't know why I think that.
No, it happened in Cold War. It happened in like the second Doctor episode.
Huh.
And then, so yeah, it runs away. And what I like about this episode is that there's a bit of tension here. And you'd think that that's where the episode is going, but it kind of goes, no, actually. And you see like 14 be like, no, I am not going to lose my cool. I'm going to be like fair to Donna, and I'm just going to drop it. Like you see him like start to get mad at her and then like go, no, I'm not gonna do it. Which is great. Again, it's not just evoking how 14 has evolved from 10, but also like all the character development that 12 had too. Which is great.
Yeah, I kept seeing. I mean, I try not to look at like too many like what does everybody else think about this, but like I think it was like the full fat podcast like people. I forget his name, but he was basically
I don't watch their stuff, so I wouldn't know.
That's fair, but he was basically saying like, oh, this episode, this feels more like a regular like series episode, not like for specials. And like sure, but then he was like, we could have had this episode with 15. I think is what, if I remember correctly, is like kind of a thing that he implies at one point, and it's just like, I'm sorry, this, like it or not, Tennant and Catherine Tate, they were brought back, sure, for nostalgia reasons and popularity, but also their chemistry is like fucking electric. Like,
yeah,
is it possible that 15 and Ruby Sunday have this kind of chemistry? Sure,
not in series 1.
Yeah, but like,
because it relies like having been together long enough. Like, 12 and Clara could have done this definitely. Sure. But, like, 9 and Rose couldn't, even though they had, like, good chemistry. It would be, like, 12 and Clara, 8 and Charlie, though that's just Scherzo. Like, that story already exists. It's called Scherzo. 7 and Ace, like, 4 and Sarah Jane, maybe. Yeah. 2 and Jamie. But, like, the iconic duos, not just anybody.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Even 10... and Donna, I think, would, like, struggle with this a bit more. And you can say that's,
unless it was, like, really late series.
Yeah, just because of that Doctor's tendency to, like, shut down and not be, like, emotionally available. So, yeah, it's just, the episode takes breaks at various moments. It could just be, like, this episode could have just been all atmosphere. But there's, like, very strategic points where Tennant and Tate's, like, chemistry, whether as, like, the, doppelgangers or as their actual characters, do some fucking, like, stellar work, setting up, like, their current chemistry, and as we'll talk about later, setting up some sort of, like, emotional stakes and establishing where the Doctor is, where 14 is, just, like, as a person, running on fumes.
Mm-hmm.
I just really appreciate how much in this episode they feel like old friends. Like,
yes.
Yeah. Like you're saying, like I hadn't thought about it, but yes, this is the kind of episode that only works when because it's not actually about the monsters, obviously. It's a reflection of themselves. It's their mirror inverses. And so it's about the two characters. And it's about how familiar they are with each other. And it's precisely that familiarity which allows the monsters to get stronger. And so, yeah, just like metatextually, that doesn't work with a new duo. And I straight up think it couldn't have worked with 10 and Donna just because I feel like 14 is just so much more haggard than 10 that you really need that gravitas to feel like this is an old man and he's just like, he's being fooled by something that he should recognize, but he's just like, he's got too much in his mind to be able to keep up with it even. And he's sort of like, he's running on fumes, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So they step out into the front end of the ship and we go back into a set, and this is really where, it just looks so gorgeous and evocative. Like they managed to reuse or only have fairly small set chunks for all of this, but just like the weird like file cabinet like computer system and the room with the tubes of water, like they don't really explain what they're for, but they're so like visually striking and evocative and cool in a way that I don't think, like, you kind of have like grimy, dingy, like early RTD era, like lived in spaceships. And you do get some pretty clean, some cleaner stuff in RTD2, and then in Moffat it tends to be like fairly clean or sometimes dingy, but mostly more clean. And then I think Chibnall kind of just goes for generic spacey look. But this is like a really interesting, because you spend so much time in this location and it's a completely alien location, and they get to play with stuff of like, okay, we don't need to explain this stuff, but let's just put weird control sciencey shit in here. We don't have to explain what it does, but it does something and it looks cool. It's a very, now that I think about it, it's a very like Star Wars, Lucas Star Wars approach to like set design.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And even going a bit further, when you learn that like the species of the captain and maybe the whole ship is like that of a like a horse, kind of the BoJack Horseman species. It's like the fact that like all of the controls are like kind of knobs that you figure like a hoof could like could like manage, and like the length of the spaceship, like you figure if they're like galloping, that's probably more manageable. Mm-hmm. So it's just like small touches like that it's like, again, evocative of like Lucas at his best. Like, you show a whole bunch of interesting stuff that could be expanded upon later and does have a sort of internal logic to it, but you're not I don't know, like you're not Zack Snydering it where you're just taking like 30 minutes to explain everything.
Yeah. And you're not being generic either. So yeah, they also find out that they're at the edge of the universe. And I have to say, like, so we've done cosmic space horror in some ways. You have like the Impossible Planet, where it's like, oh, you're in an asteroid right by the black hole, and you get really evocative stuff like the person who gets airlocked and you see them kind of float out into the black hole, and we're at the very end of the universe itself, like the stars are dying out in Utopia. But I don't think we've really never had at least not in modern Doctor Who, we've never had something like as evocative and cosmically horrifying as being at the edge of the universe, not at the end of it, but at the edge of it, like the bounds of the universe itself, because it's something that logically has to exist, but feels impossible for humanity to comprehend. For there to be an edge of the universe, there has to be an outside of the universe, and that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's very, I don't know, I guess the closest I can think of it is kind of like the kind of paradoxes of like certain faiths that like logically, if such and such follows, like, I don't know, a very like basic example is just like, oh, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, 3 in 1. It's just like, that doesn't, maybe I'm going off on my own thing, but like that's
God
the closest
is plural? Question
thing.
Mark?
I don't know. But like just holding those like big, almost kind of what in like science is a basic like, infinite universe, and like really like grappling with like the impossibility and the possibility of like the edge and the border. It's all very good. Especially like the visual. David Tennant sells it very well, of just like how normally fucked their situation would be. Yeah, it's good. And again, I did want to originally give credit to RTD again, because apparently in the script there was originally a line referencing again, I think, a part of Flux where the Doctor was like in a time ship between like multiverses or some shit. So they've technically been out here. But it was going to be like,
but also nothing in Flux has any lasting impact or matters. So
oh yeah, obviously we'll get to that. But yeah, just, again, props to RTD for like trying to bring some level of impact. Which again, we'll like talk about later in this episode and in the next episode.
Yeah. So yeah, they move on as well as move on to kind of fiddling around with these fantastical gizmos, as I mentioned. And the editing starts doing something where the first time that I watched the episode, I actually got because I thought what they were doing with the editing, where like 14 sends Donna off, or 14 tells Donna to work on this thing and then works on the other thing. What I thought was happening with the two was editing to try and show that they've been there for a very, very long time, because you have Donna coming into 14's space where he's working and 14 coming into Donna's space. And what eventually is revealed that it's the not things, and these are happening concurrently. But I knew something was up, obviously, but I misjudged where they were going with it, and it got me really, really well. And just the way it also slowly builds dread with the stuff that the not things say, like pretty much immediately gives them away, but you don't get that it immediately gives them away the first time because you're not looking for it. Like,
yeah.
my arms are too long is something normal for the 14th Doctor, who hasn't even been alive for like 12 hours yet, to say, because he's barely had any time to get used to his new form and how it's different. And needing to eat and all that. Like, it's not crazy out of character stuff, but it immediately, if you're looking for it, it's like, oh, immediately, like, this is not the Doctor that we know. I'll also say, watching on a larger screen, because I have a larger 4K screen down here compared to the 1080 TV I watched the episode on originally, when the not 14 comes into the room with Donna, you can tell from the expression on David Tennant's face that it's not 14.
Yeah, and how he's walking. It's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, it's like Catherine Tate does a fantastic job with the not Donna, and she does great. But there's just something about Tennant where they finally get to use the fact that he's played a lot of despicable villain characters to good use, because you look at the not 14 and there is just a complete emptiness behind the eyes that I don't know how he does it. But it's so creepy and so immediately telling as to which one is the fake.
Yeah, I heard some people who are like more familiar with like a lot of his work compared him to the Jessica Jones antagonist, which like
Kilgrave,
from viewing some clips I can see. I also, because a lot of some mutual friends of ours are into like Good Omens, and a lot, and just Michael Sheen saying like, yeah, David Tennant just knows how to like do empty, like an absence or a void of emotion, and it's just like, yeah, he definitely can.
Yeah. And yeah, then we get the reveal of my arms are too long, which, again, first time I watched it, I thought that was CG. I didn't realize that it was prosthetics. And the fact that it's prosthetics, both, it makes it cooler and it makes it creepier, because yeah, they go for an inherently distorted, uncanny valley way of it. And like there's ways you can do body horror, obviously. And Doctor Who is kind of constrained because of its target audience in terms of like how far it can go with it. But I think in some respects, given what the not things are and what their purpose is, I think the inherent uncanny valley, like, not gory, just more kind of weird and unsettling variety to it helps the episode so much more than if they just went like full Dead Space necromorphs with it. Like, you get the sense that the necromorphs thing doesn't quite sell they're trying to copy us, but they don't quite get everything that makes up existence for a denizen of the universe, how the laws of the universe work.
I think it's also just like really, they direct that very well. Like there's a lot of visual tricks where the perspective
Yes.
shows it looking normal, and then it sort of moves the camera a little bit, and you're like, oh, that's way off.
Mm-hmm.
And those are really
Yes.
evocative, because it's like, it kind of puts you in the position, like, it's a visual cue that cues you into the perspective of the not things, where they're like, okay, I'm trying to get this thing right, and I have it right in this way, but for some reason it's just not working in this other way. And it's a really neat little directing trick that I think
Yes.
evokes that mindset in the viewer.
Not to mention all the hidden cuts. In,
Yeah.
like, for example, this first sequence where they run out into the hallway and there's a bunch of hidden cuts so they can keep swapping back who's the body doubles and who's actually Tennant and Tate. That just looks incredible. Like, I like, there's actually like less like green screen, split screen compositing and a lot more just clever camera cuts to not show all four from the face. So you can like kind of avoid the classic kind of low budget split screen, green screen effect.
Yeah.
And it also works too, because then they're not acting to a tennis ball that's going to be themselves. They are acting to other actors who are able to give them something to work off of.
Yeah, and I like couldn't, just like as a casual viewer who wasn't looking for those tricks, I couldn't tell at all. Like, I could probably tell now if I went back and looked for it, but just like watching it straight through the first time, really well done.
Mm-hmm. Oh, actually, backing up a bit, I skipped over this in my notes. The bit where 14 like just like licks the weird computer thing is like, no, it's fine, and then starts to pretend like he's been poisoned. Is like, nah, just kidding. I'm fucking with you. Fun, like, that's the thing with this episode of like, it's terrifying, but it's also in some respects kind of the funniest one. But just in little gags like that, or the later one where they get in the rotating wall and it just does a full 360 and doesn't actually like get them out of danger at all.
Yeah, little light moments of relief before the deep shit. It's
ping-ponging between like goofy horror and or goofiness and like actual genuine terrifying stuff, like on a level that I think is as good as any Resident Evil game. And those games are masters of ping-ponging between like actually scary and just really fucking stupid and goofy. But yes, in the commotion, 14 and Donna get split up and kind of run through these corridors and run into each other, and there's a really tense scene of trying to figure out like who's the fake one, who's the real one, if they're both real. And in this scene is where you get this scene with 14 and what is eventually revealed to be a not Donna, where RTD does in fact mention both or both allude to the Timeless Children arc and directly mention the Flux. And, you know, I've been on record as not particularly liking either of those things. I think from the benefit of hindsight and as someone who has calmed down and chilled out like considerably in terms of like what those arcs do, I think that like I don't necessarily hate the idea of the Timeless Children arc anymore necessarily. It's just that it doesn't really do much character-wise over the next few seasons other than having like 13 stand around looking mopey and be like, I don't know who I am anymore. And the way that it is told is bad. And that also, you know, the complaint that's always been there, that I feel like it would be more compelling if it was the Master than if it was the Doctor. But that's just me. It's more like, it's not a terrible idea on paper, but it's utilized poorly. Same with the Flux. Like, Flux has so many things going on in it, and it kind of feels like to some extent that a significant chunk of the universe getting destroyed doesn't really feel like one of them. Not to mention the fact that for the longest time it was like we were legitimately unsure as to whether or not stuff had been undone or not. And to some extent, I think Chibnall had meant to or tried to initially imply that the damage of the flux was actually reversed, but it was done so badly that it kind of came in here and RTD's like, no, that stuff totally stuck and like half the universe is just gone now.
Yeah, it's
and I think that that works and gives good character stuff for them to work with in these episodes and gives more character work with it than the actual story. Like nobody's like, yes, it's an adrenaline crisis situation and they don't really have time to sit around and mope about it, but like nobody really felt that like bothered or insanely freaked out by the fact that like half the universe was destroyed in the flux.
Yeah, it's always the thing where it's like, okay, you can do something like kind of dumb or stupid, but as long as you do something like afterward that like is good, you know, sure, show me impact, show me character growth, show me development. Like, I don't know, Darth Maul not being dead, spoiler alert, after getting bisected is like very stupid, but also out of that comes some of the best like episodes of like Star Wars animation and some of the best arcs, arguably, you know, some of the best comics and I think a book as well. My point is they do stuff with it, and it felt like for such like a massive like lore change, you know, you can say like Doctor Who has no canon all you want, but to change something like that fundamental and then have it basically like effectively act as like, you know, ratings or like shock value, and then not really seem to like translate to anything other than 13 finding like 10 different ways to say I don't want to talk about this. To have it actually play like a character impact with 14, and again further kind of, you know, give credence or credibility to the fact that his character ends up going where it does by the end of the giggle, you know, setting that up here, it's so much more satisfactory. I'll even say I empathize with like some 13 stands that like I feel like this is what she kind of should have gotten out of that, but you know, better late than never, I guess. It's I don't expect it to have an actual impact on things because it's not like, you know, with half the universe being gone, Doctor Who is probably never going to get rid of the Daleks or the Cybermen or any like iconic like monster. Like that's not going away. But it was nice. Yeah, it was nice to see some character impact. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. It manages to do something with it for once. And I think at the point where I am as a person, I am of the opinion that like do whatever, even if it is like, you know, okay, as a Kingdom Hearts enjoyer, do whatever, even if it comes out of nowhere, even if it feels like an ass pull or a rewrite or, you know, wasn't really hinted at all, do whatever, but it needs to have a good narrative or emotional hook or punch to it that it lands. And that's the difference. Like Moffat coming up with his own special incarnation that none of the doctors talked about before to explain Time War stuff on paper sounds kind of stupid, but it is in service of a good emotional beat, and John Hurt plays the character wonderfully. And so that works. Chibnall comes up with his incarnation, and despite thinking that Joe Martin is really cool and I love the look of the Fugitive Doctor and all of the broad stroke stuff around it, the character is not used in a way that is interesting or compelling at all. And the stuff that is compelling just upstages the actual current Doctor because you're like, boy, this character seems more interesting than the one that we actually have. Why aren't we following this person? Same with like Timeless Children or Flux. Like, I guess spoilers for next week, but Bi-Generation was leaked. I knew about that for a month before we got there. And admittedly, yes, it had been long enough since I heard about it that I had like made my peace with like, okay, it's going to happen. But even when I saw it, I was pleasantly surprised with it, because even though I think the execution of it is clunky and not explained as well as it should be, it is ultimately in service of landing a very good narrative and character beat. Even though it is kind of stupid and comes out of nowhere and is sort of premise ruining if you think about it too hard and probably shouldn't be done again, blah, 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 blah. It is in service of a good emotional hook.
Yeah.
And that's what RTD retroactively does with some of Chibnall's stuff here.
Yeah. I like how, kind of getting back to the recap, both the scenes here with 14 talking, like being broken down basically, and then Donna explaining like a niche part of her like backstory, are again just like the actors like perfectly showing like which one of them like is actually them. And also something that I didn't notice until like relatively recently is that the lighting in the scenes of like when we're first introduced to the not things and in these scenes is the same, like in letting you know which one is real.
Oh, interesting.
So like
I did not know
that. So when 14 is like doing the stuff with like kind of like the, I don't know, like the tubes full of water, it's like bathed in blue, and then his scene with like the flux and everything, that's like tinted blue. And same with Donna with like
Orange,
the file cabinet, that's orange, and then later it's orange. So just like subtle things like that you don't need that, but it's again like a good attention to like detail and like production design. And as like as one of those like former English geeks that was always just like, hey, what does this color represent? It was just like I felt seen. I felt seen in those moments.
Yeah, definitely. I will say I have it in my notes at about this section here, and it's been something that people mentioned that they wanted to hear discussion about. There's been a thing going around on Twitter, and I don't think this is the intent of the episode, because it was ultimately written, 2 years ago at this point. But I think it's a very interesting potential read on it, of the not things as emblematic of AI creation tools, in that they can only copy and remix based on something that already exists. They are not capable of originality. They can't figure out what the plot of the episode is. They need the doctor to do it for them so they can copy that.
Huh.
Similarly, they don't have a good grasp on stuff like proportions, or if something is not on you, it still exists. It doesn't just disappear. And their interpretation of the universe's beings being based entirely on raw data without context or interpretation. Like, they see war and violence and all of that, but they're not able to come up with anything else beyond that, because that's just what they see.
Yeah. The contradiction of Donna can see herself as brilliant and also stupid, finding juxtaposed or like paradoxical meanings in like art or, even literature with like, AIs that can like write essays or fan fiction, just like not being able to like quite get a grasp on that, inject meaning, only like project it or regurgitate it. Yeah, there's some good stuff there. For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't necessarily think that that's really like what it was about, because it was written long enough ago that I don't think like AI image creation tools like definitely did exist at that point, but they weren't as prominent or nearly as uncanny valley realistic enough for them to be really knowable at that point. Like by the time that really happened, like they would have been filming. But I think it's a very interesting, like, applicable read of things that adds an additional layer to the episode. Because again, death of the author, like, just because the author didn't intend the reading of a thing to be that way doesn't mean that there is no meaning found in reading it that.
Yeah, I've seen trans femme readings of 12's arc. And, that's not
exactly.
That's not really textual at all, unless you literally cite the 13th Doctor as evidence, but you can't really do that. The part of like what makes art meaningful is like that someone made a thing, and then there's like an interfacing between like ideas, cultural interpretations, things that the author didn't bring to it, or maybe something the author brings to it that the audience has never like heard of. So again, you could get very like metatextual with the AI stuff. Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's a good episode when you can do that.
Yeah, and in this confrontation, and the not things reveal themselves in their one-on-ones, and just the not Donna completely breaking 14 David Tennant really gets to show off all facets of his acting ability in this one episode. Like, he gets to be angry, he gets to be clever Doctor, he gets to be in his default Doctor mode, he gets to be evil, he gets to be completely broken, all sorts of things in this single 60 minutes of television.
He gets to be in his bag.
Yeah. The contortionist bit, which I love. It's so like creepy and like it's almost Sam Raimi-esque of like comedy horror of like the contortionist Doctor like turning around and running after Donna while repeating her name, and the frame rate's fucked with too, so it looks even weirder.
Yeah. There's a moment I haven't seen. I think it's kind of, there's an added layer to it with the next episode, but just 14 kind of having a moment alone, just beating the shit out of this like corridor, and then he kind of like has a moment, like breathes, and he just says like good, as if like, okay, I didn't like actually trauma dump to my friend, I didn't actually like, I wasn't actually vulnerable, it's okay. It's like, it's so sad. It's like a very sad kind of like cope moment, which is just like, normally I think I'd be very annoyed by that, but the fact that like that's kind of addressed next time keeps it from being kind of like a normal 10th Doctor era, like I'm just gonna like run from my trauma kind of like eye roll moment. As said, he's in his bag this episode.
Yeah. And it gives us a great reaction video for further use of him punching the wall and screaming. Me when Chibnall Doctor Who.
True.
We get this scene too of the Doctor invoking superstition to hold the not things back temporarily. And it's possible that in the future this will be directly referenced as like, it seems like it is going to be directly referenced as like a thing that let all sort of cosmic horrors in. And there's the cool angle of invoking a superstition at the end of the universe. But it is an interesting like signifier too of like, RTD has said that we're going to get more fantasy, more cosmic in the next few seasons. Like, I mean, for Christ's sake, the fucking Christmas special has literal goblins. So it's interesting that it's already in what is arguably in some respects like the hardest sci-fi episode of the lot, that we start to signify the shift towards fantasy.
Yeah, it's gonna be I'm curious how that like plays out. I mean, like, you could hardly argue that, like, Doctor Who has been, like, hard sci-fi, but, you know, it's another way that the show can reinvent itself. It'll be interesting to see how that goes beyond the Christmas special.
Yeah. So yeah, they kind of get cornered on the bridge of the ship, and there were jokes coming around in between like this episode and the giggle of like last week's episode had one Doctor and one Donna separated by a pane of glass, and this week's episode had two Doctors and two Donnas separated by a pane of glass. So therefore, the giggle will have four Doctors and four Donnas.
Well, is it increasing sequentially or exponentially? That's the question.
Yeah. It is funny because I was watching, and it doesn't actually matter. I was just watching. I'm like, wait a second, is that the same type of like plexiglass like door?
He sure does love
And
that
maybe-
shot.
And maybe it is, but like, you know, it saves money. Whatever, it's cool. And yeah, we find out that they can only copy. They don't know what happened on the ship either and what's going on. I think I have in my notes here neurodivergent Doctor moment where he's like, I have to not think, and he's like, but I want to though. But yeah, I do kind of like that because they can only copy, like the only way to hold them back other than just literally destroying them is to not give them anything to copy. To slow your thoughts down enough that they can't copy them. But it's revealed that the captain went outside the spaceship, and that's been what the banging sound has been, like the impact sound. It's revealed that the captain essentially using some technobabble speak, whatever, slowing your brain, was able to set up this slow self-destruct countdown and then killed themselves to make sure that the not things wouldn't be able to catch on to it. And so the countdown gets sped up so they have a fighting chance, and we're into this final chase sequence, which has my favorite gag in the entire episode, which is when the not Donna like turns around to try and head off 14 and he just fucking throws her and keeps running. It's so funny.
That was good.
He doesn't even hesitate. He's just like, whoop. Fucking football move right there.
Yeah.
It is really funny because it's just like, yeah, she didn't copy that because he hadn't done it yet. Makes sense.
Yeah. And we get this bit. Some people were a little not too happy about this with the resolution of the Hads plot. But honestly, I think that makes perfect sense of like, it's a time machine. It should theoretically know when the hostile action has been dealt with and when it needs to come back to save the people that save its crew from harm. And I feel like if they didn't resolve it that way, then I'd just be commenting, well, wait a second, shouldn't the TARDIS have shown up because the thing would have been dealt with? Plus, it's still not the end of the episode because you have this little like it's almost reminiscent of the bit in Alien where Ripley gets off the ship and you're like, oh, it's good, except like the xenomorph like traveled along too. And it's like, no, it's not over yet. You actually need to, there's like a last second fake out that almost gets you with the fake Donna. And I think it's a good piece of horror too, of like the not Donna had gotten good enough at being Donna that it copied what normally would be the correct answer of Mrs. Bean is funny because it just is. Whereas Donna is overthinking things and trying to rationalize it.
Yeah. It's like a Turing test moment.
Yes, exactly. And then it is really funny how you just have like the lever like ejector ramp for the TARDIS that just throws her out. and then the ship explodes in a frankly gorgeous looking explosion. And I'm not one who usually goes like, wow, that looks good, but like that shit looks good. And then there's the kind of the shot of them like traumatized, huddled by the TARDIS console. And every time I see the episode, I'm like, man, now that I think about it, a lot of my favorite episodes of Doctor Who end with this energy. What does that say about me? So, and there's setup for the next episode, and Donna kind of prodding 14 to open up about some of the things that he opened up to the not Donna about, and him just doing, the 13 thing of just kind of shrugging it off, but in a more compellingly done way, IMO. And we get to the final scene, which is Wilf's only and final scene in this, which it's pure fan service, but damn it, I am a fan and I am fucking serviced. It's just it's great to see him again, even if it's just for this one little bit. And, obviously you get some jank in the next episode where they have to use like off-camera stuff and like doubles and use of archival audio and that sort of thing to kind of write him out of the next episode. And it's like slightly clunky, but that being said, I'm really glad that they got him back and that they didn't. Okay, so I still have managed to get to the year of our Lord 2023 without watching Rise of Skywalker, but I'm glad it's just he shows up, he says hi, there's a little bit of reunion, and then he's fine. He's fine. He's just not on screen.
Yeah. The BBC or whatever production company does not have the budget to Carrie Fisher him, nor should they. It's also like a perfect, we kind of, I think it was smart, even if you want to argue that like in terms of like the episode, the Mavity thing doesn't do anything. It's, it's kind of starting you off on like a false sense of like, oh, this is like a fun one kind of. Then, but like, then you go through all of that and it's kind of a heavy moment, but then then you're lifted right back up a bit. And the episode kind of ends with like, oh, a cliffhanger, this is the end of the world, but also like, I'm fucking happy to see Wilf. Like that was like
Wilf is unironically like one of my top 5 companions, even though he only really counts as a companion for 2 episodes. And one of those episodes isn't even good.
It's a good moment. When he was tearing up at seeing David Tennant's face, I was just like, you know what? All reservations aside, which I pretty much had none by this point. It was just like, this was good. I liked this. Yeah.
And to be absolutely fair to Rise of Skywalker, like nobody planned or expected that Carrie Fisher was going to suddenly die. It was a total unexpected tragedy. And here, from what I understand, they kind of had stuff in place of like, he's 93, we've got him for this, we don't know how much he's going to actually be able to do, and he probably shouldn't have a super prominent role, so they were able to work around it in the next few episodes without it like horribly derailing the plot or scenes or anything, which I think was probably pretty smart.
Rise of Skywalker, or whatever episode 9 was going to be, it was kind of like 7 is the Han Solo one, 8 is the Luke one, 9 is the Leia one, and this, they definitely... Like, Wilf is important, especially in the context of, like, the noble family, but, it was just the right amount, I think. Obviously, it would have been great if we could get him for more, but the fact that he was able to complete this scene, and it doesn't feel... You say fan service, I wouldn't even call it that, and maybe it's only like because he's no longer with us that I feel that way. But it just
Yeah,
works.
I mean, oh well, it's fan service to me because I'm a Wilf stan.
Sure.
And literally throughout the Star Beast, I'm just sitting here going, "Where's Wilf? Where is he? Where is he?" But you know, it's good fan service, even if it doesn't have much to say, obviously because of the circumstances in which it was filmed in. It's good and feels nice, and it's a nice little tribute, and I feel like it's better to have this be his final scene, you know, especially considering like. To go back to Star Wars Last Jedi, you have the thing where Leia almost dies, and that was like totally scripted and shot like before Carrie Fisher passed, and you're just kind of like, boy, that's unfortunate. Whereas like here, it's like, you know, his last scene is a normal scene, and that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but with that, you kind of have teases for next week. Something's gone horribly wrong. Murray Gold is pulling out all the stops with the score, and there's like a crashing plane, but otherwise, like, it's like, that's it, moving on. And you get that very nice little card in the credits in memory of Bernard Krebin's 1928 to 2022, and that's Wild Blue Yonder. Anything else anybody wants to bring up before we move on to ratings?
It took me until I think the most recent viewing, the scene where the real scene where the Doctor and Donna are kind of like really debriefing in the TARDIS, like, oh, she'd almost copied you. What really happened to you for the past 15, you know, from her perspective, 15 years. I started to like finally appreciate just like how impressive that set is. Specifically the lighting, because there's so much like complex, like, you know, it's kind of like getting a bit dimmer and lighter, and just the fact that they're able to like manually control all of those lights really made, I mean, it's already like, you know, an emotional or like a significant scene. It already feels that way, and if it was in a TARDIS set that like didn't have something that fancy, you know, it would have been like perfectly fine. It would have been good, but just like seeing that just like kind of added to like the, I don't know, the mood, and just like shows like, you know, the type of thing the TARDIS can do. And it's a very small thing, all things considered, but it was like one of the new things I caught on most recent watch, and I want to commend the set design, because fuck, that set must have been expensive.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on to ratings, I will pull up my little summation on my phone. Wild Blue Yonder evokes many great Doctor Who atmospheric two-handers before it, your Schertzos, your Midnights, your Heaven Sense, etc. But it still manages to feel like a wholly unique execution and concept that deals in some absolutely delicious cosmic horror, sold by the impeccable acting of one of the greatest TARDIS teams of all time. Tom Kingsley does an absolutely fantastic job directing the episode, and I think it's by far the best looking special out of what's currently been released. Obviously, it's, who knows, maybe next 2 days from now we'll have some really amazing visuals. But I really hope that Tom Kingsley returns to direct more Doctor Who in the future. The CGI is fantastic, surreal, deliberately plays with the uncanny valley, but it's paired with absolutely fantastic practical and in-camera effects. RTD manages to bring back arc ideas from his predecessor, something that hasn't really happened on New Who that much. Like, Moffat did kind of respond to some of RTD's stuff in some ways, but it wasn't really a major focus. And he just kind of did his own thing. Same with Chibnall. Like, they don't really acknowledge their predecessor's stuff that much. And manages to take the good character hooks from those ideas and wrap it into the portrayal of the 14th Doctor for these 60th anniversary specials. I feel pretty confident in saying that it's probably the best episode that we've had since World Enough in Time Dr. Falls in 2017, which was 6 years ago. S tier. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, if Star Beast was the return to form, the we can do this again, the Star Wars The Force Awakens, to use a completely different metaphor, I feel like this is the scaring the hose episode. Just, we can still, deliver kind of like that classic, episode that makes the kids kind of like hide behind the sofa, but still peek their little heads out. Great use of David Tennant and Catherine Tate, taking the unique opportunity to use their history and their chemistry to really add weight to the episode. Having it be like a midnight tier episode while also using, the conventions, the plot, everything to kind of lift up something that came before in service of, the special and also what's going to come next. I think it's a great, with all 3 specials out, it's a great bridge. It's a great bridge episode to everything that's coming next. Again, set design is on point. Use of CGI, visual effects, practical, and computer, great. Really, the only drawback is it depends on how into that Isaac Newton pre-roll thing I am at a given point. But it's S tier for sure.
Yeah, I think it's just a really good sort of spaceship horror episode in the vein of, something like Satan's Pit, kind of, but with that cosmic horror spaceship setup. Yeah. But obviously here we don't have a crew. It's a lot more psychological. It's a lot more focused on the Doctor and Donna as characters and their dynamics together, and sort of looking into a mirror and seeing their funhouse reflections push back at them. So I think it's a really conceptually interesting episode. It's technically really impressive. It's quite well directed. I would say this is like a 8.25 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next week, we will be discussing the final of these 360th anniversary specials, The Giggle. Which, boy, I imagine we'll probably have a lot to talk about in that one, which is saying something, considering that this is now the second week in a row we've had an episode that is longer than the episode we actually covered.
Feels good to be back.
We are so back. Until then, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at B2TARDISPod. I'm Jeff. You can follow me on Twitter at WheatleyDL.
I'm Aurora. You can, of the Iridescence, you can follow us on Twitter at Aurora Borealis.
I'm Jen. You can follow us on Twitter at AGPenis.
And we will see you all next week.